What you're about to see is a remote viewing session that was conducted totally blind by the remote viewer. The remote viewer knows nothing about the nature of the project or the target, but I'm going to tell you what the target is so you can follow along when the remote viewer describes what the remote viewer perceives during the session. At the end of the session, I will then tell the remote viewer what the target is, and then you will see the response from the remote viewer when the remote viewer understands what the actual perceptions were relating to. So here is the actual target for this session. The Chinese influencers of the U.S. elections in 2024. Now, the target subject is the most senior operative, subject A, working for mainland China, who will be the most successful at interfering with the outcome of the elections in the United States through any means and in any way in 2024. So this is not simply thinking that there would be influence with regard to computer hacking or anything. We don't know what the most important means of influencing would be. So there are three focuses. The first focus is in March 2024. This is being recorded in February, so it'll be next month. So the focus is the operative, subject A, working for mainland China when most deeply involved in doing and planning influencing through any means the outcome of the 2024 U.S. elections during the target month for the given focus, and that is March 2024. Now the second focus is same thing, but October 2024, in the heat of the elections. Now, also remember, we're not stating which election. We're just stating during the election, so it could be for any office. Now, their focus 3 is for November 2024, immediately after the election, so we can see what the response is. So, focus 1, March, during the primary season. Focus 2, October, in the heat of the main campaign, right before the election. Focus 3, right after the election in November, All right, so let's see what the remote viewer perceives for this target. All right, Aziz, so we are ready for you to describe your session for deep news, and at the end of your session, I'll tell you what the target is. So just so everyone knows, you don't know what the target is, right?
Yeah, I do not know what the target is.
You did this totally blind, is that right?
Totally blind.
All right. So let's just go. We'll skip the preliminaries, and why don't you just start with your page 4 and tell people what you're getting.
Great. So basically, I saw this. It kind of looked like just an indoor environment, multiple subjects and some objects around. I started seeing one subject in particular sort of look like a portly male subject with maybe glasses on his face. It just seemed like a portly male subject. I started to see with different flash sketches the other aspects of the environment, that there was an urban area, multiple subjects in this space. I mean, multiple structures in this space, and specifically that room with the objects and multiple subjects being within one of those taller structures. So structures in an urban area, basically. Basically, we also have other pictures popping up. I have subject A, which is this portly, seems like formal attire, maybe semi-formal attire. Just I see a jacket-looking thing on him, and a portly male subject with what looks like maybe glasses on the face. But then I start to jump into some more descriptions of these subjects going into page 7 and onward. But just sort of jumping into a deep mind probe, basically, of subject A. It seemed like he had this pit feeling in his chest, and there's a bit of blankness in the mind, a mild sense of anxiety, sort of covered by a bit of calm. But his mind seemed like a point, so I guess that like a sense of anxiety sort of is channeled. So there's like his mind was like a point, and well, his mental energy was sort of funneled into this forward facing strong frame demeanor, and it's inside it just seemed like he was mildly unsettled and anxiety ridden. But
Let me
yeah.
add also that this is focus 1 for this target.
This is focus 1, correct?
Okay,
yeah.
keep going.
So, going more into the mental activity of the subject, it felt like the subject, activity-wise, in the mind during the deep mind probe, it felt like that subject was engaged in what I would describe as persuasion. It seems like subject A wanted to persuade large groups of subjects, mainly ones that subject A thinks are important or powerful subjects in this context, to sort of think along the lines that he's setting forth. So a persuasion game just seems like what's in the mind of subject A. It seemed like I was also seeing other images of another subject, a more slender, taller subject, and it seemed like this more slender subject was... It didn't look like subject A, this more portly glasses jacket subject, but this slender, taller subject, I deducted celebrity. I mean, he's being ogled or treated like a center of focus from a public perspective, like a large group of other subjects were focused on him. It seemed like this was a big part of this persuasion aspect of the subjects of subject A's mind, is having this other subject that I guess we could call subject B. But subject B was this subject in front of a focus gathering, and it was like he could control this focus gathering, this large population of other subjects. It was like I got the sense that like if he's moving left, he could get them to move left. If he moves right, he could get them to move right. So whether that was literal or more metaphorical, it just seemed like that was a perception that I was seeing, is these masses of subjects being led along and controlled by subject B, and that subject seemingly an object of control of subject A. And subject A being far in the shadows, subject B being sort of exalted or put on a pedestal by this great number of other subjects. And yeah, it just seems like this is what I'm picking up. I'm just seeing flashes of this as I'm looking into this persuasion narrative.
So as I'm looking at your session, especially page 9, it looks like subject A is influencing or controlling subject B, and then subject B is the one who's controlling or influencing the crowd.
The crowd, yeah. So
is that correct? That's the way to...
Yeah. But subject A, he's very much in the shadows. He's basically like a shadow puppeteer controlling subject B from the background, behind the curtain, so to speak.
Okay.
But I don't feel like subject A is like a super secret individual. It's just that's the way that the puppeteer stage looks. That's the way it works. It doesn't seem like he's out on stage. So even though his identity is not seen in this format, it's I don't feel like he's like a super secret agent type of person. I do also feel like that with regards to this large crowd, there are other puppeteering or competing controlling agents, so to speak. Other people trying their own puppeteering of different subjects, other people who don't seem to have that puppeteering format, but who are also out there trying to sway public opinion, this persuasion. There's competition in this persuasion game, is what I'm getting at, and their arrangement is similar to subjects A and B, but it's their goals are similar in the context of just trying to control and have these connections, these tendrils reaching out to the crowd that control their way of thinking to match their own ideologies. So it's a weird puppeteer game, kind of like a tug of war competition between I guess you could say, the hearts and minds of the public in terms of this population that's the crowd in focus. So yeah.
What happens then when you go to page 12 and you do a movement exercise, I see, in terms of who's controlling subject A?
Yeah, so it seems like...
Did you cover everything that you were doing on page 11?
No, I not really with page 11.
Okay.
Just before
Let's go back then to page 11.
Okay, so yeah, the mechanisms for influence that I was probing for on page 11. Subject A and subject B, I'm seeing them a lot more, the height difference between them in this probe, but it's subject A is shorter, and I'm basically seeing subject A just speaking to subject B, who is the taller, leaner subject. And it seems like subject B just listens. So subject A is clearly the one calling the shots here, even though subject B is the one in the public sphere. But I at this point, I'm starting to feel like subject B is like a politician or a political figure or public leader of some sort. But it honestly, the whole dynamic doesn't feel political between them. It feels like Hollywood. It feels like a Hollywood agent controlling an actor and getting him in front of the red carpet to do the stuff. I mean, it's like, it feels, when I look at the dynamic of just subject B speaking to the crowd, that feels political. When I look at the dynamic of subject A using subject B and talking to subject B, that feels like a Hollywood agent. It feels very Hollywood when I see that. And so it's I don't know, just as I keep going and looking at subject A's side of things, I see him sitting at desks with objects, or sitting at an object using other gizmos and gadgets. It's like he's organizing life things for subject B. It's like he's organizing what he does, managing his life. That's why it feels like an agent. It just feels like he's organizing what he does, the subject B. And I get the sense of literally seeing like this subject A speaking to other teams of subjects and sort of sending them off to do his bidding, and that being like all behind an actual curtain, and seeing subject B on the other side of that curtain speaking to these large crowds of subjects. And it's very clear that the leader in this situation is subject A. But now to go on to what you were saying before with page 12, that was who's controlling subject A. And then things started getting even weirder, because it seems like subject A himself is not at the top of this chart, and he is very much controlled by this council of other subjects in very formal attire. And I literally just see this curved room that sort of curves around, that has this long curving table, and at the head of that table you see this lead subject, and this lead subject is speaking to subject A, and that lead subject is speaking, and there's this whole council of other formally attired, formally dressed subjects, and subject A is just at the other end of the room, very intimidated, very, very not in his usual sense. I mean, before I was saying he was a bit anxiety ridden, this is nothing compared to how he feels when he's in front of this council. When he's in front of this council, he is terrified, and it seems like I don't see him showing that terrifying feeling, though. I mean, he's very intimidated, but he seems to carry himself with the sense of like, I'm doing business. Like, this is like, I mean, he's communicating. He's like, this is like a work thing. But it seems like he seems to take directions from this council on his general actions. It seems like the council's more in charge of these more macro level things, while he's just in charge of the nitty gritty to get those macro level things done. And it seems like he has a significant distance to carry out his own these orders in his own way. And it's like he's not really here that often, like before this council. I feel like the being in front of this council happens regularly, but it's not like, this isn't like his daily life. He doesn't go to the office and end up in front of this council. Like, it's much more rare than that. But subject A, I sense a lot of fear, a lot of like super anxiety. But like it's just he's very afraid, and he's kind of afraid for himself if he like disobeyed. I get the feeling that his physical body is in danger if he was like, reckless in these situations. I get the feeling that the idea of them killing subject A or other subjects would not be far out. I mean, it would be something that would be very easy for this council of subjects to do to subject A. And I also feel that subject A is aware that these subjects have killed other subjects before. It just seems like they're afraid. He's afraid. He doesn't want to question this group. He doesn't want to go against this group. And he seems like he's hiding all of that under a professional mentality where he's just trying to communicate in the work sense and just clarify and crisply do his job and be professional in the situation. But honestly, it just feels like a very small, low-level employee meeting a CEO of a mega corporation. But relative to the public eye, Subject A, if someone just met Subject A and knew what Subject A does, they would not consider Subject A to be a low-level employee. But in this council, Subject A seems like a very low-level employee. So it's like there's a hidden hierarchy that's like levels and levels above. Like at the lowest level, you're in the public and you see Subject B. If you're a little higher up, you're aware of Subject A being like the head of things, but there's a whole nother level of secrecy, and you see this new hierarchy, and then you see this very far removed from the public council of subjects that is very much in control of and quite intimidating to Subject A, and that council is made up of both male and female subjects in formal attire. So that's all from page 12. So yeah.
Okay, so the next page, on page 13, you move on to focus 2.
Yeah.
And that's at a different time. So why don't you, and I'll tell you what the time is when you get the target revealed, but why don't you describe what's going on focus 2?
All right, so I see Subject A. I see him also in the jacket, formal jacket looking stuff. I mean, it seems like he's got the portly attire, same as before. I don't see him with the glasses this time, so maybe that's something that's not always on his face, but I see him sweaty. He's like wiping his brow. I mean, he's sweaty, he's nervous, he's anxious. He seemed nervous and anxious before, but now he feels like he's about to have like a little panic attack. I mean, he's a degree more than he was before. Not as crazy as when he was in front of that council, but he's definitely on the more nervous side of things. Then I see 2 images of Subject B floating through this focus right here. One image of Subject B is him in front of a crowd, and the crowd is very energized. It's very big, but I feel like Subject A is a bit apprehensive when looking at Subject B in this situation. There's another image though. Another image is Subject B in a room that seems kind of more dimly lit, and he's just sitting down and he looks rather melancholy. He doesn't really seem to be very energetic. I mean, before he's in front of this crowd and there's a lot of heightened emotions, large crowd making loud noises, but and he's sort of holding his hands up like this. But in this other situation, Subject B is sitting alone and quite sullen in a dimly lit room, and he looks very melancholy. He feels lost, mentally speaking. But probing Subject A in that context, it seems like Subject A isn't even really thinking about Subject B when he's alone in that room. And Subject B is just like not even in his mind, and he's working on other things. He doesn't care at all about Subject B. So that's basically what I'm seeing in that focus. But it's as I go through the deep mind probe of the target time for the focus 2, and start really thinking about the most important activity, once again, the deep mind, I'm picking up that sunken chest feeling of super exhaustion, sort of like he's dropping everything or dropped everything. I mean, it's just like really exhausted. But I feel like there's an even bigger difference between himself, Subject B, and himself and Subject B, like a big distance between himself, Subject A, and Subject B. And there is still that sense of management of other subjects, like Subject A is still managing other people, but work doesn't feel as tense, feels a bit more like backseat driving. It seems like he's not as nervous about outcomes, but is still a bit on edge and in the game, the same game that he was in before. But the road seems easier to traverse now than before. It just seems like there's fewer obstacles in general. But then moving on to focus 3, should I move on to that?
Yeah, move on to focus 3, which is the last, and that's a different time as well.
All right, so focus 3, it seems like Subject A is I just get the sensation he's falling. Like he's falling down positions of power and status. I mean, I literally just feel like if there's a cliff, he's tumbling down it. And it's at first I feel like Subject A was happy, and then things sort of got a little complicated in his mind. Like the sunken chest feeling was there again. He seems to have that quite a lot of stress there. And that sense of a loss of power, it just feels like all is lost in his mind, and he's working with like a contingency measures to climb and claw back to having more of his influence. It feels like as I said before, it feels like a competition, and it feels like he's engrossed in this big competition, and it feels like subject A is engaged in destructive measures, like just energetically destructive measures. Maybe like I deducted explosion and energetics, but it's just energetic. Just the energy feels quite destructive and erratic, and it seems like that's meant to disrupt the environment in general. And that feels like, I don't know. It feels like if he was having a chess game with somebody and he started to lose, it feels like this is literally flipping that chessboard to nullify the idea of the opponent being able to pull a proper checkmate victory. And this flipping of the chessboard is done to ensure that the game still goes on and it's not just over and you lost. So it's he's not having a good time at any point in any of these focuses, but really at focus 3 seems like he's really fallen down quite a bit. So yeah, that does conclude all the data that I have.
Okay, so are you ready to find out what the target is?
Yes, I am.
And just for the audience to repeat, we've said it before, you don't know anything about the target.
I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so let me tell you what the target is.
Great.
The target is there's a couple of descriptions here. The target for this deep news is the Chinese influencers of the U.S. elections in 2024. Now, it didn't specify which U.S. election, just the Chinese influencers. The target subject, which would be subject A, is the most senior operative working for mainland China, who will be the most successful at interfering with the outcome of elections in the United States through any means and in any way in 2024. Now, focus 1 is that operative, subject A, working for mainland China, when most deeply involved in doing and planning, influencing through any means the outcome of the 2024 U.S. elections during the target month of March 2024.
Oh, next month then.
Next month. Focus 2 is the same thing, but for October 24, the absolute end of the election, the most frantic month of campaigning. Focus 3 is November, immediately afterwards. Now, this is very interesting. I didn't know how the Chinese would try to influence, but this was new. If this is what's going on, this is brand new. The old way of thinking about influencing the election is computer hacking, and hacking the computers and hacking the voting machines and the companies that make the count the ballots. This is different. This is saying that one of the ways that they're trying to influence, some of the most powerful people in American politics are the campaign managers. If the best way for a foreign nation to influence the outcome of the elections, the politicians are often idiots. It's the campaign managers that manage them. And those campaign managers often have far more power than the actual politicians. The politicians are the ones you see. That would be subject B. Subject A would be the person who's telling him what to do, managing him. And according to these data, one of the ways that China may be influencing the U.S. elections is by manipulating the actual politicians through their management. So rather than try to go after the voting machines, and rather than try to go after the politicians, no one's looking at the managers. They're like open game. If I was a Chinese intelligence agent and I wanted to manipulate the U.S. elections, the people that I would go after were to bribe or own in any way, shape, or form the managers, the people who, because those people then become the chief assistants. If the person wins the election, those people become the chief assistants. So your session is fascinating because it seems to suggest that that's the most vulnerable element of the U.S. elections. It's not the politicians, it's not the voting machines, it's the people who manage, because nobody's looking at those. And they have huge influence over the politicians. Politicians are basically, often they're just idiots, just stand up and say things. It's the people who are giving them the information the people that have their ear in the background, those are the ones that have the great power. And what your session seems to suggest is perfect in the beginning focus, 1 in March. You have this classic thing of campaigning where the subject B is campaigning in front of the crowd and subject A is telling him what to do. That's what your own session. And then in October, everything's a little bit more frenetic, more frenetic, and subject B is getting a little bit sort of wrapping things up, but also subject A is getting a little tired. And then it looks like in November, it looks like subject B lost the election, and subject A's new task is to disrupt the outcome. Throwing the chessboard up, that's like saying fraud. That's like saying the election was a fraud, and then continue the battle afterwards. That's what it looks like from here.
On page 15, I have the deduction there. It says election.
Yeah, you deducted that it was an election, that it was all about an election, and you had no idea. That was just something what you perceived, yeah.
I wonder who's the thin, tall political candidate who's being controlled by this person.
It's a good question.
The lean and tall person.
It's a good question.
Is being controlled by
the
China.
other thing is, don't go assuming that this means presidential candidates. If I was a Chinese intelligence organization, I would say I'd go after governors. I'd go after senators.
Yeah, it could probably be it's not just a single-pronged attack. You probably have to attack a whole network of political figures here.
And this target was open-ended. It was Chinese influence of the U.S. elections. I thought it was fascinating when you had the person, subject A, confront what I call the Politburo. It looks like that curved desk where everyone's looking at him.
Yeah, he thought those guys could kill him. And he thought that there was nothing that could stop those guys from killing anybody. Like he was literally just like, well, maybe not anybody, but it just seemed like if they wanted to kill him, they could kill him. If they wanted to kill other people, and they could kill them. So it's
there's so many attack vectors in the American electoral system. There's the voting process itself, mail-in ballots, the voting machines, the whole thing. And they're only now starting to, actually in Georgia, they just now started to print out paper copies of your vote so that you can actually see who you voted for. It's not just an electronic thing. It actually prints out and you get to check to see if that's correct. But before that, it was the machines. And that's what people actually were the most suspicious of. But there were so many other attack vectors. And one of nobody is looking at the managers. Nobody. And that's completely open. And if I was an intelligence operator and looking at your session, I didn't even think that until I saw your session. And then when I saw your session, I said, that makes perfect sense. If I wanted to influence the elections, go after the place where no one's looking, the managers. Anyway, that's how I'm interpreting your session. And yeah.
Wow. That's a big deal. I mean, I do have subject A. I'm seeing him on page 11. I did see him. He wasn't just speaking to subject B. He was speaking to other teams of subjects and dictating, you do this, you do that, this. Like there was specifically in that image, I drew 3 other subjects down and him sort of behind the curtain, just dictating to them, like, you do this, you do that, yada, yada, yada. I mean, he was definitely in charge. But, wow, that's pretty terrifying, to say the least. We'll have a very action-packed year, so to speak, in terms of this 2024 election, I'm sure. But it's a lot rides on it. So.
And it's so easy to gain influence over subject A because no one's watching. They can just offer him money. I mean, it's so easy. You can go to a campaign manager and what's $500,000 or even $1 million to the Chinese intelligence services if they own a campaign manager afterwards?
Well, I guess as long as subject A does whatever this council says, it's free game of how it gets done. So
if he doesn't do it, they'd kill him, and that's why he's nervous.
He's nervous, yeah. So it's pretty wild. Anyway, that's pretty fascinating, and that's a cool target. That's a good one.
Okay. Well, now we'll see what some of the other viewers I've come up with, and we're off to the next target.
Off to the next target.